All right, so it's a couple minutes after 1, so we are gonna go ahead and get started. So welcome, my name is Shelly Reynolds, and I am the director of the Charting the Life course Nexus, and super excited about our showcase today. As many of you know, we would typically be all together in April, live, where we have an opportunity to meet one another, share ideas, attend really awesome breakouts, and just really have fun together. But as you know, we are doing that virtually instead. So we appreciate all of you that have joined us. We have awesome topics today. I'm always just so thrilled with all of the exciting things that people do and how they implement Charting the Life course. And over the last couple years, we've really seen school teachers, school transition counselors, higher education, early childhood really gravitate to Charting the Life course tools and ideas and framework. And again, I'm just amazed and always just in awe watching people talk about how they're implementing it and how we all can learn from them. And so that's what is really about. If you haven't had a chance to check out the awesome Flipgrid videos that our breakout panelists have done, they are really good. They go in depth in a 10-minute span, also reinforcing things that they're going to talk about that we talk about today. Real quick, this is our first time doing this as a webinar and not as an open one. So you will not see your own cameras. You will not even have that option just because we are live streaming. So those of you that have questions about that, again, utilize the chat, ask questions in the chat, say really great comments in the chat, kind of let us know what's going on out there since we actually don't get to see your faces and interact with you. But with that, though, we would not be able to do the showcase without our sponsors. Our sponsors make it possible for us to continue to do our work and really are dedicated to not only getting Life Course to their constituents, but making sure that the Life Course Nexus is able to do the work that we can do so we can sustain and grow and expand this as much as possible. Aetna has been a partner over the last number of years in a lot of different arenas, but they've always been committed to the showcase. So we wanted to take a few minutes to really give Debbie from Aetna an opportunity to share about their sponsorship as the lead sponsor for today's portion of the showcase. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Debbie.
Great. Thank you, Shelly. Hopefully everybody can hear me. Thanks for having me. As Shelly said, I'm Debbie Pifer. I am the Intellectual Developmental Disabilities Administrator with Aetna Better Health of Kansas. At Aetna, we provide managed care services in 16 states. We are very proud to support the work of Charting the Life course, and we are very excited to support the showcase again. A little different format from the last ones, but we're very excited to support it again. At Aetna, we really embrace the philosophy and the principles of Charting the Life course in our work in managed care. In several of our states, our service coordinators have taken training in Charting the Life course, and we use it as a framework working with our members. We understand that in long-term services and supports, we have to look beyond healthcare measures like HEDIS scores, that type of thing, and we have to find out how to help people get to their good life. So we continue to work hand in hand with our members to provide services and supports to help them along their trajectory to get to their good life. So Charting the Life course helps us provide services and supports to help our members live a self-determined life. So this year has been really exciting for us at Aetna. We had our first graduating class of ambassadors. We had 13 ambassadors graduate, so that was pretty exciting. We also had our own started our own COP, our own community of practice, to make sure that we're really ingraining it into our systems. So as I mentioned, we really embraced Charting the Life course in our managed care work as another way to make our work person-centered and keeping it on the focus of our members' vision of a good life and how we can support them to get there. For myself personally, I became an ambassador last year, and this year I took the coaching badge and the presenter's badge. So I'm excited to be here today with you to just expand my knowledge base on Charting the Life course. So we really value the strong partnership that we have with Dr. Reynolds and her crew at UMKC. It's a great partnership. And again, we're very proud at Aetna to sponsor the showcase again. So thank you for your time. Welcome to the showcase and enjoy the great things that they have planned for you.
Great. Thanks, Debbie. And thanks, Aetna. Again, we appreciate not only your sponsorship, but being able to really work with Aetna to figure out how this can truly be integrated within a managed care structure has been really a learning journey for both our organizations that we'll continue to work on and expand really beyond just developmental disabilities. And that's what's been really neat, watching it be expand to special healthcare need, behavioral health, and the many different ideas that Aetna has in terms of its outreach. So thanks again, Debbie. So just so that you kind of know the agenda for today, I'm going to pass it over to Jane in just a few minutes, and she's going to introduce you to a wonderful panel. And then be sure to stay on. As you know, if you came to our showcase live, we love to give goodies, life course goodies and gift bags and stuff. And so we are thinking of different ways throughout this. So, be ready, because if we ask a question or we do different things, we're looking at ways to either have a drawing or to kind of choose some of you to mail some of our goodies that we would have had if we were in person. So please do that. Stay on to the end, because some of the drawings will be at the end. But we also have an opportunity to really highlight one of our innovators and our stars. And so it could be one of you don't know. So this person does not know that they're being honored. So stay tuned. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Jane.
Thank you, Shelly, and thank you, Debbie, as well. So welcome, everybody. I'm really happy to have you here today as we focus on education. And as Shelly said, I hope you all had a chance to watch all of the spotlights, all of Friday Feature spotlights. We have 4 of them. So if you missed any of them, they're still available on our website, and they will continue to be available on our July page that will be up probably tomorrow. We'll have all of the different features, and it will have the live session recording as well. And then there's another surprise that we're going to put on there that I'll tell you a little bit about later. So we're really excited to have 3 of the 4 panelists or 3 of the 4 presenters here today as our panelists. And so I want to take this chance to welcome our July live panel, starting with Linda Ramler, who is with the University of Connecticut Center for Excellence on Developmental Disabilities. Welcome, Linda. And then we also have Kelly Flotter with the Sycamore County, Ohio School District. And then Greg Nolman, who is with Towson University in Maryland. So to get started, Linda, I would like you to start us off by just introducing yourself and telling us a little bit about what your project was incorporating Charting the Life course. And don't forget to unmute yourself. I do it all the time.
For me. Okay. Hi. Thank you again, everybody who's spoken before me. I just cut into my 5 minutes, and so I want to make sure I get what I want to say said. So I am Linda Ramler, as Jane said, and I work at the UConn USED, where I'm currently the Developmental Disabilities Network Coordinator. So UConn USED's been involved in the Connecticut transition community of practice, and at the same time, I was providing intensive technical assistance to a transition program for adolescents and young adults that was being run by one of our partner agencies. And those students were tuitioned by the public schools into this program, and that program was based in an operational business. So as someone who has been around for a long time and hopelessly engaged in inclusive activities and the idea that there really are times like transitions that are tough for those individuals and families, I really worked hard to come up with a way to build on those individual strengths so that they could be employed before they exited the public school system, and that they didn't literally fall off a cliff and end up sitting at home. And since the USED has always been invested in community trainings and technical assistance for families, and the hot topic was obviously transition, we piloted a 10-hour training program for families in 2016, and we incorporated for the first time life course tools into that. And so transition age students were allowed to participate as well, although most of them chose not to because it was held on a weeknight and a Saturday when they had better things to do than go to something with their parents. And that incorporated, as I said, the life course tools into a program that really focused on preparing families for taking the reins with their students so that they didn't fall off the cliff. We knew too many students who had and were literally sitting at home as couch potatoes waiting for one of the adult service agencies to do an intake and evaluation and pick them up and eventually find them a job. So the training program then grew to cover even more information that we learned families needed to support their students. And it's now 16 hours or so spread over 4 sessions of direct contact. And we follow that up with technical assistance, individualized to what each family needs. So basically the training starts with non-negotiable understandings about adult services not being a mandated program like school-based services are, that they may end up on a waiting list and so on, and not to waste those last years pushing for continued education, that they maybe need to have more community-based experiences at those times. And part of that introduction is we use the life course Real People, Real Lives graphic, depicting how human services, including special education, has put up barriers between the individual and their family and between their family and the community. We emphasize strength-based, person-centered planning throughout the whole thing. And we literally have parents write down stuff that people have said that was not kind about their children, crumple up the paper and chuck it during the training. We talk about principles of self-advocacy, self-determination, and self-directed services. And we introduced the Connecticut core transition skills that came out of that community of practice. But at the USAID, we modified these because they really sounded like everybody had to do things independently and individually, or they would never be able to function in the community. And we modified those to say, basically, that these are things families need to have in place. And if a person can't do these skills independently, they need to make sure that they have the supports and services in place so that the individual can still lead a quality of life. So we then introduce basically the idea of raising expectations, and we move into the one-page life course profile. We also have a column in that for what doesn't work. And the reason we did that was because of my technical assistance to that provider agency, where we had a number of individuals with some pretty sad histories. And we wanted to make sure that people knew ahead of time what things not to approach because they were painful, or things that might make somebody feel bad and not able to keep looking forward to their future. Then we use the life course trajectory, and we go into a whole half a day of social capital, which includes families developing a community resource map, and with their student coming up with the circles of support they have today, and also ones that they can develop for the future. An associational map, which is something that was based on John McKnight's view of how you can come into the community because you have common interests with other people. And then identifying actions that John O'Brien said to build community, some of which you can't do nowadays with COVID, but they had to do with things like, bring some flowers over to a neighbor and so on. Then we started exploring life possibilities, which is also life course material, but we divided it into true community options versus segregated ones. We wanted families to know the difference between a place of your own to call home, for example, and something like a group home, which sometimes operates like more of a mini institution. We explore life possibilities individually, and then we have special sidebars on transition from pediatric to adult healthcare, financial planning like ABLE accounts, alternatives to guardianship, thinking college, and employment, customized employment. And then we introduce the integrated service star, and we guide them, the families and individuals, if they're participating, through what they would use for employment or post-secondary education, and also for healthcare transition. And then they have to do a third one that they can pick the area, or they can do a generic one so that they have kind of supervised practice in doing that. We really emphasize that personal assets, relationships, and technology are the most critical to access, and they do allow people to access community resources. And that reliance on eligibility-based services is a last resort, given budget and eligibility constraints. And then we go into the buckets so that families know what they need to support, and we tie it all together, and they complete action plans, both between the third session and the last session, and then again at the last session for the future. And we build on those to provide follow-up support. That's what our project was. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Linda. Kelly, would you go next, please? And don't forget to unmute yourself.
Hello, I am Kelly Flotter. I just want to thank everyone for having us today. I'm really excited about this. Would love to have been there in April, but this is a really exciting format. So thank you all for the invitation. So I am a special education teacher at Sycamore Community Schools, and I have transition age students. So I have students that are 18 to 21, so they've met their graduation requirements. And so I was able to present last year, and it was so inspiring. I really came home thinking, what more can we do? How do we make this bigger? And so I was trained a few years ago, and I started off thinking about what it was like to start that process. And I went and talked to my special ed director, and I have always been partnering with Celia Schlomer from USED at Children's here in Cincinnati. And it has been a wonderful experience. So we started talking about what would work for schools and what would work for families. And what I started thinking about is, I'm a teacher, and so I tried to be realistic about teachers, and that a lot of times teachers feel like we're adding one more thing to their plate. And I wanted to make sure that we approach something without doing that. And so what we did is asked for teacher volunteers that were excited about transition or excited about what transition and talking to families could be. And we did a survey and asked if anyone would be interested in trying a pilot. And so what our pilot looked like was pulling teachers from pre-K all the way to transition. And we included a parent mentor also for the district. And what they did was then we had the teachers meet with us, and we shared, Celia and I both shared one evening with teachers about the trajectory and what that looks like and how powerful it can be. And we gave teachers time to process that, and we asked for them to do it individually, because we wanted them to feel that vulnerability of what they're asking families to do. And after that process, we brought them back together and we talked about how difficult that was. And then we charged them to pick a family that they thought they could work through a trajectory with, and to do a trajectory with the child and one with the parents, and to really dive deep into that trajectory. We wanted it to be a really intimate, slow process this first go around, and really get an idea of how families felt about it. So our other point was that we wanted families to feel safe, because it is a really vulnerable place to be. And so Celia and I presented to just the families alone also. So the teachers had that opportunity, but we also wanted the families to have that opportunity, that they got to hear the information just with other parents, not with teachers in the room, before they started that trajectory process. So what we did was, after everyone had had the same information, they went through a trajectory together, and then we came back all together and talked about it when everyone had been through the process. And that was just really an awakening for all of us. It was amazing to have families in the same room with other families. We could see them, light bulbs going off in heads, or just, oh my gosh, I never thought about that. And someone would say something from the high school level, and a preschool parent would go, oh my goodness, I hadn't thought about that. I never had imagined that for my child. Thanks for making that something that I even think about. So we saw all these beautiful moments in that. And so we wanted to take it a little bit further and give them more tools. So we started to share some of the other tools within the framework of the trajectory, and life stages, and the STAR with families. And so our next step was to come together again in the spring to get all the final information from families, but instead we were virtual. But we did a survey and had some feedback from families. And ultimately what we determined is that everybody wants more, is what our surveys were. So that was pretty much our pilot, was really just trying the trajectory and charting the life course, and to see what the feelings were, and what we felt were families really want more and teachers really want more. So.
you, Kelly. That's fantastic. Thanks for sharing that. And then finally, Greg, if you would unmute yourself and talk a little bit about what you did.
Yeah, hi. Thanks for the invitation. It's great to be with everybody. So I am an assistant professor at Towson University, just north of Baltimore in Maryland. And Towson University happens to be the institution for higher education representative to the Maryland statewide community of practice. Maryland joined the national Charting the Life course community of practice, or the community of practice for supporting families, back in 2016. And shortly thereafter, they formed their own statewide community of practice, guided by the principles of Charting the Life course framework and recognizing the person within the context of the family and community. So the goal at the state level was really to utilize the statewide community of practice to develop policy and regulations, programs and practices to better support families who were going to be caring for family members with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And very similar again to the national community of practice, really invested in helping families and individuals in particular create and live their good life. So as an IHE representative to the statewide community of practice, our emphasis, as with all the partners, there are about 15 plus statewide partners on this statewide community of practice. All of us are tasked with kind of developing our own projects that we take back to our local communities or in some way make an impact. For me, having worked primarily as a special education teacher and transition specialist with the school district prior to transitioning myself up through into academia and now working with pre-service teachers, I've always been especially committed to student-directed, individualized education programming and planning, as well as those notions of student-directed transition planning. So I really feel it's an important emphasis that needs to be made at the pre-service level as well. So knowing that as an IHE rep, I would have to develop a project as well that I would be taking back to my local community. What better way to do this than to kind of take the hat that I once wore as a local special education teacher and add to that the hat that I had as a pre-service teacher trainer, an in-service teacher trainer, and gather some feedback from our students. What are they missing? What do they already know? And what do they really want to know in the future in terms of kind of practicing ways in which they can better support families to, again, emphasize that student-directed component that we know is just so crucial to successful transition across the lifespan. I guess I should mention in this as well, I'm also a sibling advocate. So I have grown up with this and utilized a lot of the person-centered planning tools, not necessarily Charting the Life course framework or tools, but prior to this, knowing a lot of the other person-centered approaches that are out there and utilizing those tools within my own family's kind of development and with my younger sibling, helping him through his transitions through school. So again, really seeing that these tools are very effective in helping families to broadcast that vision and ultimately that individual, in my brother's case, really being able to advocate for himself. This is what I want. And helping others to see that through pictures and through just a series of meetings and continuous kind of self-advocacy. So again, it's kind of neat that I get to take all three hats now, the sibling hat, the teacher hat, and the pre-service trainer hat, and create an opportunity for our undergraduate teachers as well, or our undergraduate pre-service teachers and our graduate in-service teachers, so in-service teachers working toward a graduate degree, and teaching them about Charting the Life course framework. Just as we at the state level, as state level partners are asked to take on projects, I then take that one step further and ask my students to also develop their own projects. So we have a course called our Transition Through the Lifespan course. Students taking that class ultimately utilize some of the Charting the Life course tools on their own lives. They're planning for their own good life, utilizing these tools. And from that, then, they ultimately figure out ways to not only better understand the tools and the incorporation or linkage to the Charting the Life course framework and principles, but in addition to that, they then are asked to come up with ways in which they would be utilizing those tools within their own practice, either again, their current practice if they're in-service teachers, or their future practice as pre-service teachers. Through all of this, we also last year had received a small grant, some seed money from the Maryland Developmental Disabilities Council. And they provided that money so that we could invite Jane St. John from UMKC to come and speak with our community members. So faculty members, undergraduate pre-service teachers, and graduate teachers, and specifically share with them how Charting the Life course framework is being used not only across the country, so nationwide, but again, how it's being utilized in individual practices. So a lot of case studies, a lot of examples. And we walked through a full day workshop starting out with about 100 folks at the beginning, and then slowly weaning down to a smaller set who really wanted to study those tools in great detail and practice. So we ended up having graduate students, around 32 graduate students, several cohorts that met together in the afternoon to work through those tools and apply that to their individual practices.
Awesome. Thank you, Greg. And you're actually first on the next question. So you answered a little bit of this. So as far as what originally got you interested and excited about Charting the Life course, I think you kind of already talked about that with the community of practice, but how did you personally get up to speed with Charting the Life course and being able to share it with others?
Yeah, so I think, as I mentioned briefly, I was very familiar with certain person-centered approaches prior to Charting the Life course. I had taken some trainings before utilizing PATH, and the MAPS process, so two other person-centered approaches. And in coming to Maryland and asking to be involved with the community of practice by the Director of Family Supports for the Maryland Developmental Disabilities Administration by Mary Ann Kane Bresci, she kind of helped me to get connected to the website and to a lot of the tools. I sat through a number of trainings as a statewide COP member. And then from there, actually joined one of the ambassador series. And so recently went through that training as well. I hope to go through additional trainings. So the coaching trainings or getting the coaching badge. And then I also hope that we can run more of our students through the ambassador series as well. So, yeah.
Thank you, Greg. Kelly, I think I heard you say what got you excited was coming to the showcase last year. So what else got you interested and excited about implementing this back at your school district? And then how did you get yourself up to speed with Life Course, and how do you share it with others?
Absolutely. So I would say it all goes back to, I was originally trained probably 4 years ago by Dr. Reynolds and all of you coming out to Ohio to train us. And I remember I've been in a lot of trainings. I've been teaching for 20 years. So that was probably my 15th, 16th year. And I've sat in a lot of trainings that I could take a nugget or something away from. But this was the whole day. I just was in awe. And I kept thinking, this is so simple, yet it's so powerful. And I felt really overwhelmed, to be honest, because I thought it wasn't a training that I thought, oh, I can do this at some point. This was a training that I felt I have to do this. I owe it to my students and my families to do this. And so I got really excited about it, but then didn't know where to start. And so my first start was with one family I chose, and we did a trajectory. And I'd worked with this family for years and years, and the trajectory changed the conversation. We realized this young man was very successful, but anxiety really got in his way, and we didn't have the language around that as a team to talk about. And finally, with the trajectory, it just became so obvious. And it also, I think Charting the Life course has given me the opportunity to say, I don't have all the answers, so why don't we pull somebody else in? And it gives me that ability to say that and feel comfortable with it, because sometimes we want to have all the answers. And so I think the way that I've still been able to stay excited about this is that every single time that Charting the Life course is used with someone, huge things happen. And that can be a really small thing, or it can be a huge thing, but it's always life-changing. And so the more you work with it, the more you want to work with it. So.
That's great. Thank you. I call those starfish moments, by the way. I'll have to tell you that story later.
Oh.
And Linda, if you would unmute yourself, and same question, how did you get interested, excited? How did you first hear about Charting the Life course? And how did you get up to speed?
Thank you for reminding me to unmute. Okay, so 35 years ago, I was deinstitutionalized, and I ended up following Beth Mount, who did those circles for families in the Y intersection of social capital development. And she did her positive futures planning for people who are coming out of Connecticut institutions. And I really learned so much from her about the silliness of deficit-based assessments that people use, and how ready does mean never, unless you're really looking at how you can develop a quality of life and not looking at overcoming those deficits as a first step, that you really could do it with anybody. Then what I did was I had also learned about, as other people said, about MAPS and PATH, and I worked directly with Marcia Forrest and Jack Pierpoint, and then later Linda Kahn. And of course, I was familiar with Michael Small's Essential Lifestyle Planning and many other gyrations like Bill Allen's It's My Choice and what he did for the Minnesota DD Council. And so I've looked at all these things, including developing some of the stuff on my own to fit with that transition program I said that I was talking about before. And then what I learned was that when I first saw life course planning, it came to me by my former business partner when we were in private practice consulting on things like transition and inclusive education, Robin Wood, who was one of the first people in Connecticut to wrap her head around life course tools. And she called me and didn't tell me what it was about, but said, really excited, you got to look at the stuff, you got to see it. And then I want to know what you think about it. So about 3 weeks later, I finally got around to looking at what she had told me to look at. And it was just amazing how it so parsimoniously combined everything that we used to put on huge wall sheets that got rolled up and put in the closet and never seen again, in a very usable format that could apply across the board, whether it was somebody going to summer camp and things that people should know about them, or whether it was developing, as we did with our training, a transition portfolio that they could use with the school districts and again with adult service agencies. So I started to learn more about life course, and it was again so easy to generalize what I already knew about person-centered planning into this new format, which was amazing. And I eventually signed up for the training to become a life course ambassador, and I use it in absolutely everything I do. I've been advocating it for my role in Connecticut's core committee of the National Center on Advancing Person-Centered Practices and Systems. And I think I'm a broken record about, look at life course, look at life course, look at life course. It's so much better than all these other tools. Look at life course. And I also use it in, when I do lectures for our LEND program and everything else, I incorporate it as kind of the best way I have ever found with all of my experiences in person-centered planning to address this in a very person-centered and family-centered way to further quality of life and to further inclusive living and education and everything else.
Awesome. Thank you, Linda. Okay, so Kelly, we're going to start with you on the next question. Really thinking about the impact of what you did. Can you give an example or a specific impact story of how Charting the Life course and your innovation impacted either a student, a parent, family member, educator?
Absolutely. I have a few that were really powerful. I would say the biggest one was I had a family and a teacher that worked together, and I kept listening to them talk about their trajectory, and they kept saying, "Oh, I think long term is just too hard for us right now. We really need to just think about getting to high school." And I personally was getting frustrated because I thought, "No, you guys aren't getting the big picture. You're not getting it." I learned very quickly I was the one who was wrong and not getting it. That they realized when they looked at that good life, the way their son was functioning in this moment in time was not allowing him to ever get to that good life. And the next thing I knew, they emailed me saying they couldn't make the meeting, and they had emailed me 3 pages of the things that they had done to help their son get to the good life. And they were putting in a ramp. They said in the morning he's completely dependent on the family to provide help with dressing. They had set up stations so that he could pick out his own clothes and have them prepared. They lowered cabinets so that he was able to prepare his own breakfast and pack his own lunch. They had a new ramp adjusted in their front of their house because he was dependent on the family to get him out of the house. And then that was causing huge issues with that social piece when your parents are helping you get out of the house. They did absolutely everything that they could to get him to a level of independence. And I realized that is exactly what they were planning for that future. And these were huge things that they had to do to adjust in their home for their son to really open their eyes or open his life. And it was eye-opening to me. Another thing that we had a very quiet family that never ever spoke up. And I thought, I don't know if they're getting anything, and in their review, they shared with me, we never thought about setting up a play date for our child. And so they said, we set up a play date and it just never crossed our mind, but that's what we have for her good life. And so they scheduled a play date. And so there were these huge things that families were doing and these very small things that seem small, but really they're also huge. Some of the staff were very interesting in their responses. I had a lot of staff say it was really emotionally challenging. One of the staff I loved, she had a good life trajectory for when their children were still at home because they have young children. And then they did a whole trajectory about what life looks like once their children leave the home and they're empty nesters. So they had a good life on that. One woman said that she decided not to sell their home because they realized that wasn't in alignment with what their good life would be. And I know at the last showcase that we had, I had not thought about this in terms of adult planning for the aging community. And I shared that that was something I really learned about at the last, our last showcase. And so one of the staff was really struggling because her mom was having a lot of challenges. And so they sat down with her and talked about her life and what she wanted. And after going through it, they decided to have her moved into a supported living that they decided as a family to do. So the stories that I have had have been really inspiring in that the little things really make a huge difference. And I think that's where families started to see that this little tweak really makes a difference. And I had another family say, I never even thought to ask his opinion. We've just been doing what we think. And when we asked his opinion, we were completely wrong. And I would say one other family that really, really struggled with the process, they realized their son had no context of what the next steps were. And so it's okay that we don't have a context for it and that he actually just needs to have experiences. So they signed him up and they couldn't decide on a path. So they decided to do all the paths simultaneously so he can kind of have those experiences and determine what his good life is, because we're asking someone to say what they want when he really doesn't have a frame of reference for it. So there were so many just really wonderful stories out of this process. Thank you.
That is awesome. Those are some great stories. Thank you, Kelly. And I think we have Linda, if you could go next, please.
I'm glad Kelly led with a few stories because that's what I needed to do too, as opposed to one very powerful one. If people watched my Flipgrid video, they know the one story that I already told, which is about a young woman whose parents weren't really thinking about her getting employment, and as a result of having gone through the training, took her to a job fair at a new mall that was opening in Connecticut. And her daughter saw her favorite store, which was something that she'd shopped at in New York City that was coming to Connecticut, walked up to the people there and said, I want a job, but don't put me on the cash register because I can't do math. And her mother was stunned that she advocated for herself that way. and that she was actually hired on the spot to work in that particular company, and she's continued to work there since. So some of the other stories are parents who had kind of given up on having inclusive opportunities outside of the school day for their sons and daughters because they weren't thinking in terms of using natural supports and building on relationships, or even assistive technology like calling home if you need a ride. Some very simple things like that. One family of a relatively younger student realized the importance of teaching to and doing with. That's kind of the same vein what Kelly was talking about, that they hadn't thought about the possibilities. So we worked on structuring a routine at home and how to actually impart learning to their daughter rather, and teaching her to do some of the things that she was kind of thinking she was a little princess and they were going to do for her forever. And once they got over that hump, she's really a lot more independent now, which is really, really cool. Parents also truly advocated for individualized transition programs, and particularly for employment before their students aged out. And so instead of having the typical one-size-fits-all transition program, like on Monday you make your shopping list, on Tuesday you look at the ads to see what's on sale and adjust, and eventually you end up going shopping and then cooking something as a kind of one-size-fits-all, when some of these young people already know how to cook because they've been doing it at home, and some of them may always need some support in cooking. And one of the things they needed to look at was how that support was going to be provided. I think was really critical. And so just seeing some of the new outcomes by way of IEPs or ITPs, individual transition programs, was really, really cool. And I kept thinking back to the all of when I was doing the ambassador training, and how really critical what we were already doing, which was emphasizing the kind of using eligibility-based services as the last resort, really applied to the all, because resources were so scarce anyway, that if families could build a good life for their sons and daughters without relying on a service system, that would make more services and supports available to people who may not have the wherewithal to be able to create a good life because of the resources they did or didn't have themselves. So that's kind of across the board. There were so many positive experiences that families reported, and also asked for assistance in how do you take that next step? How do you get somebody enrolled, and what are the kinds of things I need to say to a potential employer that is actually somebody I know real well to talk about my son or daughter? Back to the life course. I think go back to the one-page life course profile, talk about the strengths, talk about the interests, and what your son or daughter can give to the business. So those are just some of the things that we saw as benefits of this.
That's awesome. Thank you, Linda. I was having trouble unmuting myself for just a second there. Okay, so Greg, can you give us an impact story or two?
Sure, yeah. I think probably the biggest impact thus far, and it's to be expected. This is fairly new within the state of Maryland. So while families have heard of Charting the Life course, the number of teachers who are familiar with the framework and the tools, unsurprisingly, is very limited. Just from the workshop alone, of the 100 folks that came to our workshop last year that we were hosting for pre-service and in-service teachers and community members, 93% had never attended or viewed a life course event. They hadn't been to the website. They weren't familiar with the tools. And when asked about their knowledge of Charting the Life course, the same percentage, about 93, had very limited knowledge about what Charting the Life course was. What I found fascinating, though, from that particular aspect is not that they didn't know about it, but what came about from just one day of training through this workshop, and what has ultimately resulted from each of the courses that I've taught since. So I mentioned the fact that for our pre-service teachers, they all go through a transition across the lifespan course. At the undergraduate level, it's predominantly focused on that transition from middle school to high school and high school into adulthood. So helping families and helping teachers really better understand individualized transition planning. At the graduate level, through our Teacher as Leader in Autism Spectrum Disorder, or the TALA concentration at Towson University, which is directed by Kay Holman, those graduate students being teachers in the field currently across varying grade levels, from early childhood all the way up to those late stages in high school, the emphasis really is on utilizing evidence-based practices and applied research within their instruction. So this framework is giving us opportunities to ultimately try to figure out how we can support families while at the same time testing the feasibility of inputs into their current day-to-day practices or their daily practices. And 3, testing what they didn't know at the beginning and how that ultimately has resulted in some sort of change at the end. Again, I mentioned that each of them are doing individual projects connected to this particular class that I teach at the undergraduate and graduate level. So the impact that I have found in particular to be probably 2 or 3 stories that have meant the most to me. One, I had a student who had a family member themselves who they ultimately started utilizing a lot of the person-centered approaches in planning for their own child's transition through school. It was pretty neat to see how adept they were at quickly picking up those tools and seeing how it could be very applicable within their own life. I had 2 teachers who co-taught in the same, I guess they didn't co-teach in the same class, but they taught within the same district and ultimately sometimes would work within the same building. As a result of their project, they began to incorporate some of the Charting the Life course tools within their planning processes in school, not just for the family members that they directly serve, but actually went to the administrators of their school and said, hey, we think some of these tools might actually be useful for our team in special education to actually begin planning. So they weren't just utilizing those tools for individuals with disabilities, but rather for the team planning as well. How were they envisioning what they were going to be doing kind of moving forward? The third kind of anecdotal story that also has meant a great deal to me is this notion, Kelly actually brought it up just a bit ago, about teachers often saying this is just one more thing that we're going to have to do. And how do we do this with so many other competing priorities that we have in our day? And we already have responsibilities legally to ensure that we are providing and planning for this individualized education and that we're providing specially designed instruction for all of our students on our caseload. How does this fit? Well, in this instance, and I think this also gets to one of the questions that somebody even was asking in the chat, how are we doing these things in a virtual setting? What I have found really fascinating is in the spring for the course that I taught, the transition course, we had students, undergrads going through and graduate students going through the classes, and they were working on the tools and then halfway through were disrupted because of the pandemic. So at spring break, they did not come back to campus. We went virtually. And we began utilizing the integrated support star in a little different way, in which they were actually trying to figure out for themselves, how am I going to best connect with community supports, with technology, with different resources that are ultimately going to help me in getting through the rest of this semester with the students that I serve. So again, they saw those tools in a way that before it was just adding on one more thing. I don't see how this could ever be possible to do just an additional set of maps. And here we are now in the class utilizing these tools to figure out ways in which we ultimately are going to better plan for ourselves and the short-term outcomes at the end of the semester there. I've since, through my summer school classes, continued to utilize that integrated support star. And again, continue to ask folks, now that we're headed into the fall, and it likely is going to be virtual, in what ways will you utilize these tools for your own practice? But then how can you begin to ultimately incorporate some of the Charting the Life course tools, particularly the life course trajectory, from a virtual planning standpoint? So really using this through distance learning or remote teaching. So, yeah.
You're muted, Jane.
I thought I was unmuting myself and I muted myself. It's one of those days. I'm sorry. So for our final question, Linda, we're going to start with you. And don't forget to unmute yourself as well. What were some of your challenges and your biggest successes? And then kind of to follow that up, how are you planning for sustainability or scaling it up if that's a possibility, or is this a continuing program that you have there?
This program is continuing, and the only barriers were in terms of timeframes, because families are very busy, and that's a big investment of time to participate in this. And somebody had asked a question about what's an optimal number. I never had to worry about that because we never had any more than 15 people register at one point, and that was certainly a manageable number. But basically what the barrier, like I said, had to do with families' investment in time. So we really wanted them to go through the whole program so that they wouldn't miss out on things like transition from pediatric to adult healthcare and how they could use life course tools to do that, because that's important to do. I think everything else was relatively easy. And for sustainability, this is something that we're continuing to offer, hopefully face-to-face someday again. And we had also set the frame for this to be accessible as an online program for families. And we finally got an instructional designer. I mean, she's not been available because she's been doing stuff for other people, but she'll be doing the instructional design around getting everything that I do over the course of those hours, 16 hours or so, up online for families to access at will and at their convenience. And we're also in the process, I'm in the process of developing another approach to this that really has to do with adulting for the young adults and students themselves, because I think one of the things that our cohorts of families who've gone through the training have also realized, as somebody else said, is that their sons and daughters can self-determine, they can self-advocate, and that this is a wonderful tool for them to have in order to be able to do that. So we're, again, going to be modifying some of this so that we can do an adulting program specifically for adolescents and young adults.
That's awesome. I noticed a question that kind of fits in with this question that someone had asked specifically to you, Linda. So I'm going to go ahead and incorporate it now. But so how many families at a time went through your 10-hour training? And did you find a manageable number at a time? And was it in person? Was it in person, online, or a combination?
It was in person, although it will be available online. And I think I mentioned before that we won't do a training for less than 5 to 10 people. So it was always a low number. Like the lowest number I ever had was 5, and the biggest number I ever had was 15. And that was very manageable to do that. And the biggest numbers also came when we did some of our early piloting in conjunction with public schools that ran a program for families. And so again, it was a shorter version of the program, but they had more families come to that in some of the districts that we did this in. But 15 is fine. Too much more than that, it's hard to make sure that everyone's actually developing their transition portfolio as they go. And so they leave with a finished product, and they've also got action plans in place that you can then follow up on.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, so next we're gonna go with Greg. So again, what were some of your challenges other than, you mentioned some of the challenges with COVID, but other than that, with getting started and with getting buy-in and that type of thing, what were some of your challenges, biggest successes, and then planning for sustainability and like you said, how does this look in a virtual world?
Great. I've been really fortunate in that the university that I work within, the College of Education that I work in, is fairly flexible in terms of incorporating additional practices or just trying to pilot new things. I think especially if there's some sort of research or evidence-based link to what we're doing. And while the research around person-centered approaches has been going on since, I believe, the mid-'80s or late '80s through mid-'90s, I know that there isn't as much out there just yet on charting the life course. So in some ways, our university is actually even more supportive because they're sitting there saying, great, we could be on the forefront in terms of really trying to figure out ways in which we can incorporate some of these principles with fidelity into the teaching practice. It's interesting too, because I think about challenges more so from kind of the overarching concerns that I have about our pre-service teachers going into school settings. And while many are siblings or have family members or have some sort of personal connection, which is what brought them into kind of interest in becoming special educators, not all have certain experiences. And I'm not necessarily looking for everybody to have a personal experience. But what I am concerned with is an individual that leaves the program and sometimes forgets that the aspects of self-advocacy and self-determination are so critical, including, dignity of risk and allowing our individuals, our students, to try things out. We have too many teachers who I think, put on the kid gloves and are very, very kind and compassionate and caring and all the other, adjectives, unfortunately, that sometimes are stigmatizing getting thrown into special education alone, but, are too protective, are too concerned. Yes, we listen to our students, but at the end of the day, it's what we ultimately want to do, or the teacher would want to do to make sure that everybody kind of is able to navigate successfully through without many hiccups or bumps. And I will liken this challenge one step further to the fact that when I teach our transition across the lifespan course, I have our students do an exercise in which they are to draw out a picture of the job that they least liked growing up, or some of them surprisingly are drawing jobs that they currently have, and we have a different therapy session for them on working through how to help them with that job. But they crumble up the paper and they throw it around the room, and other people pick it up and they try to guess what these jobs are. And what I'm trying to emphasize with this, as they're guessing and as we're teasing each other about our drawing skills and maybe what those early jobs were in our life that we didn't necessarily like, is that too often I'm brought in as an instructor into professional development settings and having to coach folks on, well, did you ever actually consider what the young adult was saying they really wanted to do? Maybe some of the behaviors we're seeing on the job site, or maybe some of the reasons we're not seeing success is because there wasn't that genuine interest in the job in the first place. It's just what was available to you. That is, the challenge there, again, is that there isn't enough of that focus back on the teacher to tap into that empathy, but also to tap into their own experiences. I didn't like certain things, and here I'm just promoting a certain transition because that's what I'm supposed to be doing, right? So, utilizing these tools and really helping to ground it first in experience where they're working on how the CTLC tools fit within their own life, then gives students an opportunity students meaning my pre-service instructors, an opportunity to see, oh my gosh, this really made an impact on me. I can see how now that voice is so important to carry through, and obviously to be really listening and to really be understanding and helping to further promote and include that advocacy of the individual themselves, of the individual with disabilities and their family overall. So it's been very powerful in that piece, and we haven't reached any challenges yet per se. I think the university continues to be very supportive. I have to thank my chair, Betsy Neville, for continuing to give me a lot of kind of space to explore this avenue. And I think our next step in terms of sustainability is really threefold. One, we'll continue to utilize Charting the Life course tools with our pre-service and in-service teachers to help them use it in their own life, and then develop these projects so that we can see what's going on in their practice. But then, the next step beyond that is to actually set up a study. And so we propose to start this in the fall, where we begin following those students after they leave our course to figure out whether or not they're continuing to use the Charting the Life course tools and continuing to further advance the use of the framework within their own practice. So that's really exciting. We're looking forward to that. And I think that the third piece here, ultimately, that we see is really ensuring that as we are thinking about Charting the Life course from a professional learning community standpoint, or community of practice at the state level, and now bring it to the local community level, it's how can I, as an instructor, help to further foster, facilitate, support, whatever you want to use as kind of that word, new communities of practice within these schools, so that we see the teachers feeling very empowered and very knowledgeable on how to utilize these tools. Because ultimately, as much as I know that this is by families for families, if we don't have teachers who are knowledgeable about these tools and who are, that doesn't mean they have to use all the tools, but they have to understand the language. They have to understand the impact on their own lives to then be able to see that this isn't just another IEP, this isn't just another planning session, but this is integral and can be integrated within practice in a way that is meaningful for all. So setting up those communities of practice at the local school levels and studying how those ultimately flourish, blossom, and grow. So we're at the start of it, but we're really excited to be moving forward.
That's exciting, and I can't wait to hear the results of your study, your follow-up study of your students, that, you know, to see what they're doing with it once they go into the teaching world. So that'll be exciting to hear about, maybe next year or the year after at the showcase. So yeah, awesome. Okay, so Kelly, I'm going to move on to you. Make sure and unmute yourself. So what were some of your challenges? And I think we've heard some of your successes, but anything else you want to add in there? And then I know that from our discussion earlier, from our conversation earlier before we began, that things are still up in the air for a lot of people, I think, for what's going to happen this school year. But with that in mind, how are you thinking about sustainability and scaling this up within your school district?
Absolutely. So there were some challenges. I think the beginning were the challenges of that this work requires, it's hard work, and it requires honesty and authenticity and a lot of reflection, and that can be really emotional. So we really tried to give room for that and time for people to work through that. And I think the other challenge was so many life changes that this was a year-long process. And so if we had teachers or families experience challenges at home, one more meeting or one more activity felt kind of overwhelming. So I think having some flexibility in the way we design that would be helpful. A lot of families, instead of coming to the meeting, just shared via email, like I said. So that challenge of, we want as many people there as possible, but being able to be flexible. And we had different situations that families weren't able to come, or a teacher might have had an emergency. And we left that open so families or teachers could come on their own and still take part in the meeting and follow up with each other. Another challenge is, I spoke before, teachers get really exhausted, and it can feel overwhelming. And so just really trying to understand that this isn't one more thing, this is the thing. And that it's a lot of work to begin with. And I guess that's where our teachers started to see, and that was the success, is that it is a lot of work in the beginning, but then we're having real conversations. It's not, we're not tiptoeing around things. Everything's out on the table, and we can really dive down into what's needed for the student. I would say successes that we talked about too. Sometimes people would say, well, I didn't fill out a trajectory for this, but I thought about this when I was at this meeting. And we've talked about that. You can't unsee it, that's okay. It starts to become part of you. And so if you're using that process, that's fantastic. So we had a lot of families and teachers that it became intrinsic, and they were really, that's how they were functioning. We also had some families shared that they realized, I think this was a growth. It went from a challenge to a success. Just as teachers feel like they have to have all the answers, that families, it's vulnerable to say, you don't have to have all the answers, and look at this. These are all the, when we look at that star, these are the things that we need to look at. And it's not just you, we get to look at other resources. I love what Greg was saying too, that just a lot of that goes together with this, and that we kind of talked about, if your child is, we kind of hold kids with kids gloves, and we want to make sure, there's times that I even have students that for a semester, they may really not like the job they're in. And I'm like, that's fantastic. Like, I'm so glad you found out you don't like that. And they look at me kind of like, what are you talking about? Why are you saying this is great? And then I say, and you're going to finish the semester at that job that you can't stand, because we all have parts of our jobs that we don't like, but you get to work through it, and then you get to transfer. And then when we look at your trajectory again, we're going to look at that and say, these are the things that I really don't want to do, or that I don't like. And so you get to, this is all experience. And so we kind of had families and teachers realize, oh, it's okay if it doesn't go well, or it's okay if there's a failure, because we all learn the most from those failures or mistakes. And so let's not take that away from the student. Let's let them learn through that and really honor that. because we all get to do that. So we can't take that away from them. In order to scale up and sustain this, some of the things that we did start, I started meeting with counselors on my own, just because I thought that there's a lot of students that walk in who are not necessarily have an IEP, but they may have a 504, or they may just be struggling with mental health or relationships or anything like that. So I've met with counselors at our high school just to talk about, maybe if a student comes in, you could pull the star out, or you could look at the trajectory. And we've talked about just putting this all in gen ed, that maybe this is something we should just be talking to students about. So we've been playing with that a little bit. I have a meeting tomorrow with my supervisor, the special ed director. We have been trying to get together, but things have been a little crazy. So we are planning tomorrow of what this looks like. We had some feedback around, a lot of teachers said that they thought it was helpful to work one-on-one with one family and then kind of grow it. And right now, I'm just going to talk with my supervisor about it, because I do think this may feel really overwhelming and we may not get a lot of support, just because people are overwhelmed. So I think the approach may be that we do a lot of open meetings, and that we get this out to as many families as possible. And maybe we have some Zoom meetings with families and present. Celia, maybe if she's open for it, present at just to families, and then possibly present to teachers too. I think this could be a really powerful tool. We're all struggling. And so to be able to have a tool to even help one another through this.
Kelly, we're not hearing you. I don't know. You don't appear to be muted, but.
Hey, Brett.
I think there's a,
Okay.
Kelly, I just think it's just the Wi-Fi.
Okay.
We can hear you now. It's just a little broken up. So Jane, you might want to move on from Kelly
Okay.
for a second.
Yeah, sounds good. Okay. So that's really all of the questions that I had planned. We've had several questions from our audience. And so I'm going to hit a few. We have about 5 minutes left for questions. So I think Kelly gave a few tips and tricks for getting started with using Charting the Life course. I want to address the same thing to Linda and then Greg. Do you have any tips and tricks for getting started with using Charting the Life course in an educational setting, and what would they be? And don't forget to unmute yourself, Kelly. Or I'm sorry, Linda. I'm getting confused.
I think the tips and tricks is to show this to people and show them the usefulness in multiple settings. Like I said, when we did the training, the pilot, we did some stuff directly for school staffs, and they thought about, oh, this doesn't just apply to the student that I'm talking about transition for, but this could be really helpful for my younger student who also has a disability who's going to summer camp. And how can we, develop this kind of one pager? This is who my kid is. This is what they like. These are ways to connect with them, etc. So I think the best way is to just expose people to this and really kind of engage them. I agree with Kelly that it's very emotional for a lot of people, and it can be very difficult for them. But I think when we do the training, there's a cohort of support. I'm not saying we didn't have sessions that didn't have some tears in it, but I always say you can't go down that shoulda, woulda, coulda road, and it's all moving forward. And that's the whole point of this, is that you're planning a future. And so you let go of the past and you move forward with this. And this is a great tool to do that. And it has been an easy sell. It's not been something I've really had to work hard to do.
Great, thank you. And Greg?
Yeah, so some tips and tricks. One of the things that I've noticed is that while some of the folks that I've worked with may not be familiar with Charting the Life course, they are familiar with person-centered approaches or have utilized other mapping tools in the past. And so it's a way for us to start the conversation. We also talk a lot about, well, how do you incorporate self-advocacy and self-determination, or even student-directed educational planning or transition planning within your practice. All of those are great entryways then into kind of utilizing some of the charting the life course tools in the framework overall. I think the other piece that's so important is, again, knowing that I had mentioned helping teachers to recognize within themselves some of the things they like and don't like. And so it may feel silly at first to be utilizing some of these tools in manufactured ways where they're applying it to a small portion of their own life. But once you kind of move away from that manufactured element, like, here, take this home as a homework assignment and try this, they bring it back and they really start to get into it. I mean, it's just been really fascinating. The more time they commit to it, the more they get excited about how they then will fit this not only into their practice, but ultimately into their own life. So getting in front of people and talking with them, I think, is probably the biggest thing. Just like Linda said, I hope that we can provide more supports for some of our pre-service teachers to actually go through the ambassador series themselves, so that they're trained and then can ultimately become kind of those champions for this in their schools. I think one other success story, I had 2 or 3 undergrads last year who, before the pandemic, said, boy, in my last semester of student teaching, I want to ask my student teacher or the mentor teacher whether or not they've heard of charting the life course or some of the person-centered approaches that we've talked about in your class. Because again, if teachers don't know about it, it's not that they don't want to utilize it. It's just that they need that exposure. How cool it would be if we can get more and more folks talking from the pre-service level to the in-service teachers currently, and then through that, fostering some additional change. So it's great.
Awesome. Thank you. And Kelly, we have literally less than 1 minute. If there's anything else you wanted to add or any tips and tricks that you would have for somebody getting started.
I think just, giving people the opportunity to try this and to try it in their own life, I think is the biggest thing, because you start to see, I've shared the story before where I showed it to my husband and he was really unhappy with his job. And he started to do the trajectory and realized that was not what he wanted, and went in and asked to be switched to another project and has been pretty happy with that switch. I think when people can see the work that it does and the openness that it has on families, that it really is life changing. I think that the more hands you can get it into and the more practice, the better.
Awesome. Okay. You guys have been the best panel ever. I'm so excited at what you guys have shared today. And we had some great questions. I think we hit most of the questions that people ask. And Kelly, there's actually one person that had a question that is from your district, and I'm going to send their name to you after this is over. So I'm going to turn it back over to Shelly.
Yes, I want to second that with Jane. You guys were wonderful. And again, like I said, when I started, I'm always just amazed at the work that you guys are doing to really take the framework and the principles and to figure out how to implement it. I do want to just kind of share real quickly a couple of things. One, those of you that want to write any comments and reflections in the webinar chat, those are the people that we might be choosing from and to send you some gifts. But the other thing is that Jane and the Nexus team is currently working with CDC and the Administration for Community Living to actually develop resources for parents to think through the process of their children going back to school. We actually hosted a conversation. We built a trajectory, Jane actually did, about, what's your vision for reentry look like and what doesn't it look like? We did it as a group activity, but quite frankly, it can be used at a one-on-one level. So although maybe people think that this is too much to do during a new school year, it might actually be exactly what they need to have the conversations with parents to talk about what reentry looks like, what safety looks like for them, what they're comfortable with, what virtual learning might look like. I saw on the Charting the Life course in action tool or Facebook page. If you're not on there, I suggest you get on there. Somebody actually used the vision tool, a vision for what the virtual year will look like, or what reentry will look like. And so instead of saying a vision for the future, they were like, what is vision for friendships and going into the community and transportation and housing? I thought that was a really interesting use of that as well. So real quickly, what I'm here to do is to kind of set up the next stage. At each one of these, we will always kind of highlight an innovator. If we were in person, it would be during our awards ceremony. These are people who really I identify, the Nexus team has identified them as really pushing us as Nexus leaders to learn from them about the incredible work that they're doing. So we do have an educational innovation. This is what this topic's about. And so with that, is it time for me, Jane, to open it up to so what we typically do is we identify someone that could help us share about exactly what has happened because we do recognize this award. And so I am going to now pass it over to our co-host to do that. What do I need to do? Anything?
I don't think so. Celia, just unmute yourself and go.
There you are, Celia.
Did it. Hello, hello. Thanks, guys. I just want to share that I remember the first time I met this person, and she shared with me that hearing Shelly and Jane present in April of 2016, that she left thinking for the first time in a long time, she learned something that she thought that would really work for her students. Safe to say, her excitement has not dwindled since then. She's always ready to participate and collaborate no matter what I beg her to do, whether it's sharing her story with the COP or presenting at a conference or submitting a proposal for the National Showcase every year. She's incredibly dedicated, innovative, and still manages to be a humble champion for charting the life course, and more importantly, for her students. When I asked Kelly's Director of Student Services, Stacy Spencer, to talk about Kelly's contribution, she said, Kelly's passion for all people to actively pursue their good life shines through in all aspects of her role as an educator. The targeted, individualized efforts that Kelly puts forth to support her students is done with the intention of supporting each one of them on their good life path. Kelly started this process with herself, then one young adult, and then her group of young adults, and has since shared this framework with others to expand the use of charting a life course tools. This grassroots effort grew into a pilot program, and Kelly made this happen. She developed the proposal, the programming, led the sessions, and the outreach and the engagements of the participants. There is no accurate way to measure the impact that this process has had on individuals who participated. Kelly's impact and influence in the process of supporting students, families, and staff to reset their priorities and focus on their good life is immeasurable. We are so fortunate to have her as a Sycamore employee, and I look forward to her continued collaboration with her to support this grassroots effort. Her colleague Esther Adams shared that Kelly has fully implemented and embedded Charting a Life course within her Aviator to Launch program and has taught each of her students to be leaders and actively engaged in their planning process. Seeing her students lead their meetings and advocate for the lives they're working toward was truly a remarkable experience, and I know this is just the beginning. Kelly leads with authenticity and determination. She's given students who previously did not have a voice and an outlet to advocate for themselves, and I'm so honored to work with her. And because we all know that teachers' days don't end when they leave the school building, I asked Kelly's husband, Brett, to share what stands out to him about her work. And he said, from the outside looking in, hearing her explain it, as well as utilizing some of the tools, I would say it's hearing her passion, the passion in her voice when she speaks about the program and the value that it can offer both her students as well as anyone willing to try it. Kelly, congratulations.
And if our co-conspirators, whoops. Okay, there we go. If our co-conspirators would come on in, there we go.
Oh my gosh. Oh my God. I am overwhelmed. Thank you so much. This is just unbelievable. Wow. And how beautiful my family got to present it to me too. Surprise! Thank you all so much. This means everything. And they've really kept it a secret.
They were
just knew about today.
Oh.
So that was it.
Thank you.
you.
So much. This is beautiful. Oh my goodness.
Yes. Well, thank you, Kelly. And thank you, the Flatter family, for helping out. I'm sure your husband panicked when your IT went down a few minutes ago. For reasons now you'll understand.
I was like, get down here.
Celia, thank you too. I mean, we appreciate all of your support and supporting Kelly in the work that she does. And I know there's many people on here from Ohio that are super excited about the fact that you're in Ohio. And there's many people on this call that are very jealous that you're not in their school districts with them. So thank you, Kelly. Thank you, Linda. Thank you, Greg, for being a part of this. We really appreciate it. There's good comments over on the right-hand side. So I do ask, if you haven't seen the flip grids or done the flip grids, if you went into either Linda's or Kelly's or Greg's, you would actually be able to comment and ask questions, and they respond back. And so it's really kind of a neat interaction that's happening out there. The other thing is I just want to remind you, we are doing these once a month. So we will be doing another one next month on person-centered outcomes. So those are person-centered outcomes that can be developed by educators, by support coordinators, by family navigators, by individuals. So the topic will definitely cross many different disciplines. So I really encourage you guys to participate in that. I can't thank you guys enough for staying on this whole time and being a part of this whole thing. And we're all trying to make this work, but the Nexus is really, dedicated to figuring out how to help you do what you guys do. And I'm absolutely amazed every step of the way. So, Jane, is there anything else that you would like to add to that?
I just want to thank the panel, and I wish I could give an award to all of you. And Celia, you blew it out of the water. That was amazing introduction. I just want to read this one comment that's in the chat from Colette Conchola Cox, who's one of our wonderful super participants here in Missouri. And she said to Kelly, "Congratulations, well deserved. Your 2019 session at the showcase inspired many in Missouri. As a parent, you are #teacher-goals. I hope your work continues to improve the education of many." And I think that sentiment is probably shared by a lot of people. So again, thank you to all of the panelists, and you guys were amazing.
And I was told by my staff who usually chase me up on the stage to tell me to hold on tight because they're going to do a drawing for the goodie bag. I have no idea how they're going to do this. So I guess I will pass it over to whoever's doing whatever it is they're doing on the drawing. But please answer the poll while we're getting set up for that. Who am I even passing it over to?
I'm not entirely sure. It's either Catherine or Crystal, I think. This is still a new thing, but we didn't do a drawing. Oh, Leslie.
It's Leslie. In addition to that, we will also be sending a little gift to anybody who commented over on our chat too. So we have smaller gifts too. So again, we really appreciate all of you. We do give little door prizes to those that respond on Flipgrid. So make sure that you guys get onto Flipgrid. We're just going to keep encouraging you to use a new technology. And again, thank you, panel. Thank you, Aetna, for being an incredible sponsor, and to our other sponsors that sponsor the entire conference, but this one was especially sponsored by Aetna. So again, if you guys have any questions, email us, let us know. Our website is going up. The one thing I did forget to tell you about is that I really do want to form a national learning collaborative around education and integrating this in the education realm. Jane's working on updating the portfolios so that it's specific to education for transition, maybe early childhood. And so we're needing some feedback and some different people that want to be involved. So we don't know yet how we're going to ask you how you want to be called. Jane's going to know. Okay.
Yes. So I worked with our web person today, and when we post the live session, we're also going to post the draft of a portfolio for education settings. So we want lots of feedback, things like, should we have one for different ages, transition age versus young childhood, but even just like what the questions are within like the trajectory and the star and that kind of thing. So when we put up the live session on the website, and we'll also have a picture of Kelly up there because I've asked your husband to take a picture of you with the award. And we will also post what I've been working on, and you guys, send us out. We'll put up an email that you can send all the comments to. So please, please, please comment away and be critical, and let us know what you think.
Yeah, make it a portfolio you want to use.
Yes, please.
So, all right. Thank you everyone for staying with us this whole time, and we will see you next month.
Thank you for hosting this. This has been great.
Thank you,
Great.
everybody.